Hello, Stephan here with Liquidity with an introduction to the Bavarian dialect. Euch übern Bayerischen Dialekt. Liquidity. Many stereotypes about Germany are actually distinctly Bavarian, which is really a relatively small corner of Germany. It's not like in the middle of Germany. Things like Lederhosen, Dirndl, Oktoberfest, Audi, BMW, the soccer club FC Bayern München. Wait, speaking of which, do you know what the football fans' slogans or mottos or chants like "Mir san mir" or "Einer geht no" actually mean? Stay tuned to find out. Okay, first of all, some of the boring stuff. So, linguistically speaking, Bavarian is actually part of the larger Austro-Bavarian dialect. However, even though most Austrians and Bavarians speak basically the same dialect, linguistically speaking, do not call Bavarians Austrians or Austrians Bavarians, unless you're spoiling for a fight. There is a long, very long, not always very friendly rivalry and competition between those two groups, the Austrians and the Bavarians, and it really goes back in history. Mostly they get along quite well, and some of them are actually close friends, but there is history. It's complicated. There's some baggage. Of the 16 states that make up the Federal Republic of Germany, Bavaria is the largest in terms of geographic size, but it is the second largest in terms of population, right after North Rhine-Westphalia. What constitutes Bavarian in the state of Bavaria is a little bit more complicated too. In fact, not everybody, not all of the 13 million inhabitants of Bavaria would consider themselves ethnically or in terms of dialect Bavarian. People in northern Bavaria speak a Franconian dialect. People in the southwestern corner speak a Swabian dialect. And then not everybody who lives in the Bavarian dialect region, which is that 2/3 of the southeastern corner that hugs Austria, would consider themselves necessarily Bavarian speaking. True Bavarian dialects are spoken mostly in rural areas, in smaller towns and villages. I am myself a little bit of a strange case. Now, I was born in Munich and I grew up just outside of Munich, somewhere between Munich and Augsburg. And as such, you would think I'm completely Bavarian. My parents, though, come from the Rhineland, so I always felt like the child of immigrants. So there is that regional identity versus German identity, which is really, really, really strong in Bavaria, probably more so than in the rest of Germany. And then later, I myself emigrated to the United States of America, so maybe there's a pattern in my family. I will go over a couple of examples, a couple of sentences that you might hear Bavarians speak. And some of them I picked, some of them I massaged a little bit to also show some similarities with English. And as you listen to me pronounce things, you will probably notice that the biggest difference appears to be how vowels are pronounced, how Bavarian is a little bit more diphthong friendly, and how certain things are pronounced maybe a little bit more open, also a little bit more from the throat, but in a vowel sort of way. Bavarian actually is not a very guttural language. It may come across as such, but it's technically not. Bavarians actually roll their R's, unlike regular Germans. So an R in Bavarian is always a R, whereas in standard German it would be a R. For instance, the ER ending, which is very common in both German and English, and where standard German and British English are actually very similar, where the ending ERs are often pronounced like a schwa sound. For instance, the name Peter, in American English, we actually do pronounce the ER quite distinctly as an R, whereas in British English, it would be more likely pronounced Peter, or in Standard German, we would probably pronounce it Peter, and in Bavarian, we would say Peter, more like an open ah sound. Another thing that you might notice is that ah sounds kind of become a thing between an ah and an o sound, kind of almost like a Scandinavian a with that little dot on top, right? Like an o. So for instance, my name, which in Standard German is pronounced Stephan Schaffrath, in Bavarian would be Stefan Schofroth. When it comes to consonants, the biggest difference between Standard German and Bavarian that I notice is the initial S. This is an area where Bavarian and English are actually more alike. So the word so in English is pronounced with a voiceless S, with a S sound, and that would be the same in Bavarian. So. And in Standard German, it would be a voiced sibilant, a Z sound. So words like Salat, salad, in Bavarian would be also Salat, or Soldat, soldier, would be Soldat in Bavarian. All right, let's go with some examples. So the first one, hopefully this is not going to be offensive to anybody, but you might hear it. I will explain where this comes from. So here it goes. Sie ist a goas. She is a goat. Doesn't sound very nice, right? In Standard German, we would say, sie ist eine Ziege. We also have the old-fashioned word Geiss in Standard German. Most people don't use that in Standard German. In Bavarian, we still have the goas. So you can see the similarities between Bavarian spelling and English spelling. So what does that mean when I call somebody a goat? When I call a woman a goat? Which sounds terrible, right? In Bavarian, it really means she is an annoying person, maybe a Karen. In American English, we would call somebody like that a Karen. Somebody who is a very difficult person, right? Oh yes, one more thing about goat and goas in Bavarian. In fact, up until the end of the Middle Ages, like 15th century or so, in English, these four letters would have been pronounced more like Gott as well. So, so very similar to Bavarian. To be fair to both male and female genders, I don't have anything for transgender or gender fluid people, sorry, but for male, you might often hear somebody in Bavarian be referred to as a Sau, which actually kind of sounds like the English word sow, right? So you might hear somebody say something like this. Er ist a blöde Sau. He is a dumb pig. Er ist eine blöde Sau in Standard German. Now, in most of Germany, that would be a big insult to call somebody a pig. In Bavarian, anybody who you dislike, anybody who just comes across as unsympathetic, as not somebody you care for, might be referred to as Sau. One thing you also need to consider is that Bavarians tend to be a little bit more rough around the edges. They may not come across as very friendly at first. It takes a while to get to know them. Culturally speaking, they have a harder exterior and maybe a little bit of a softer interior, unlike most Germans or other Germans. Here's another one. Das ist ein lieber Hund. That is a lovely dog. That is a nice dog. In Standard German, we might say, das ist ein lieber Hund. Wir sind daheim. We are at home, or we are home. Wir sind zu Hause in Standard German. Okay, the next one I kind of put together, you might hear people say that, but it's very unlikely. I kind of put together some words that tend to have more connection with English, or tend to be more similar to English. So somebody in Bavarian might say, "Da is a Teufel im Hai." There is a devil in the hay. Not sure what a devil would do in the hay. I don't know. Maybe roll around with another devil. So in Standard German, if you wanted to say that in Standard German, you would have to say, "Da ist ein Teufel im Heu." I bin a Mo. I am a man. Ich bin ein Mann. So I in Bavarian is spelled just like the English I. And interestingly enough, in English, that would have been pronounced like an E up until maybe the 15th century, before the great vowel change. As promised, let's talk about FC Bayern München. What do those two chants mean? So, mir son mir in regular German or in Standard German would be wir sind wir. It does not translate very well. If I had to translate into English, I would say, here we are, here we go. Okay, the next one is Una geht no nei. In Standard German, that would be einer geht noch rein. If I wanted to translate that literally into English, I would have to say, one still goes in. Obviously, we're making a reference here to a ball getting into the goal of the opposite team. So here you have the word "una," which in Standard German would be einer, and that means one as in one of those or another one, right? So if I had to translate that into regular English, I would say another one, there's room for another one. Or let's go for another one, let's have another goal. Thanks for watching. I hope this video was somewhat interesting. I hope it was helpful to understand some of the regionalisms that exist within Germany. Check out my other videos if you enjoyed this video. See if there is something you like. If there is, think about subscribing. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like.